everybody. Welcome to Based on Actual Events. I am Justin Golak. Over there, that's Jeff Hack.
Hello.
What's up, Jeff? So what we do is we take a movie in the context of a historical event or time period, and we talk about the movie in the historical event / time period. So today, we're doing Dick movie and Richard Nixon / Watergate and all the Nixon resignation and his presidency and all that led up to that. And also a quick shout out to Stalin in the room. Shout out to Dave Metz for donating it to our backdrop. Very cool to have that be a part of ours. Continue the legacy of relatively historical based pods in the Pop Studios. All right. So Dick. So here's what I was thinking. Now, here's what I was thinking. Tell me if you want to go somewhere completely different. So you don't have to improv me. You don't have to yes and this. But I was thinking, I feel like the thing I liked about this movie, it's very, it's like an ensemble cast. Like, I'm kind of amazed by how many great people are in this movie.
Dude, the cast in this movie is unbelievable.
Yeah, and they're all playing like real people. Now, the story is very Forrest Gumpy. You know what I mean? Like, it has like a fictional character or characters run through a series of real events and kind of insert themselves in gaps. So, do you want to go through, like I said, like with this pod, I think it's different than like other movie / history pods or videos or whatever, where it's like, we're picking movies where it's not like, let's find the couple inaccuracies. I would like to describe it as like, we're kind of trying to find the few accuracies through these kind of like wild movie picks. So do you want to like maybe go through some of these characters and just be like, are they even close to the people? Are they even close to what they've done? And like, what do they kind of nail, maybe even in just caricature generalities?
Yeah, I mean, I feel one thing that I thought immediately was, wow, they actually did Nixon a big favor because
they didn't make him seem as bad.
Well, he actually was even worse than the movie portrays, and also just the actor who plays him is just way less creepy looking than Nixon ever was. I was like, wow, that is a pretty flattering casting choice.
Yeah, they do. Let's see, who was it?
His name is Tom Hedaya.
Dan Hedaya.
I'm sorry. I'm
trying to think. I mean, he's like, if anyone that's in the movie, if you're not like a famous comic actor, you're just one of those like, oh, what's he in? Everything. Like, that's a Dan Hedaya.
Yes.
I'm trying to think like what else he would be famous for.
I actually looked this up last night.
Okay,
and forgot. But
oh yeah, he was the dad in Clueless.
That's right. Yes.
That's I think how a lot of people would know him. So, yeah, what do you think is Nixon not mean and paranoid enough?
Well, I mean, part of the story or whatever that they were clearly trying to lay out was that these girls like admire him at first, and then actually
the one develops a crush
Michelle
on
Williams falls in love with him, which I thought was one of the weirdest parts of this movie. Like, that's just
I enjoyed that choice.
Yeah. I mean, it was funny, but
because the movie starts that she's obsessed with like this teen idol, and she's like writing a letter to Teen Beat about this teen idol. So it just shows that she has this like. I think it was like a funny just play on the idea that so she has this like an obsession with this teen idol, which is something that's very normal for like young girls, but he's still an older guy. Like she's writing a letter. She's 15. She's writing a letter to a guy in his 30s, probably early 30s,
was he like
late 20s.
Donny Osmond or something like that, or what was that a real?
I don't know if that was a real guy.
I don't know
that's not politics, so I guess you don't have to know that history. But if that's a real guy or not, I don't. But he's clearly older. So I thought her falling in love with Nixon was just like a funny parody of the idea that we let 15-year-old girls fall in love with old men and just don't really care about it.
Right. I could see that. Still, at the same time, I mean, what a dreamboat that Nixon, you know. Every teenage girl loves a jowly, anti-Semitic, paranoid guy.
I mean, she's attracted to the power, clearly.
I mean, maybe that's the
She's going to grow up to marry an investment banker.
Yeah,
that's
kind
her
of hedge
future.
Fund guy, something like that.
I mean, and she's the one, her mom is a widow, so she's clearly got dad stuff.
Oh, yeah. You see, I didn't even put that together.
Yeah,
but
there's a good deep dive into the psychology of the Michelle Williams character to get into.
That's actually really interesting you pointed that out, because that was one part of the movie I was just like, there's a lot of quirky choices, but that was just such a weird. And I think it was also an excuse to some extent so that they could do lines like "You're in love with Dick" or like
Right.
"I'm not." There's one point where they're like "I'm not gonna let Dick control me anymore," and then everyone like stops and stares at them.
Yeah, I feel like honestly, for the title of the movie, I feel like they were pretty conservative with the dick puns. I feel like they didn't
some
overdo
restraint.
it. Feels like half dozen or less, which I thought. Here's a Nixon question I have related to the character portrayal, if we want to start at the top.
Sure.
Was he a boozer? Because he's boozing in the movie a lot.
Oh, big time.
Okay. I figured that was probably taken from real life, but I never really remember hearing about whether he was or not. Because you think of him as like the anti-drug president.
Oh yeah, but I mean,
yeah, that doesn't mean he can't be a hypocrite. I'm just saying, like, you never really hear whether.
Well, they didn't. I mean, we still don't think of alcohol as the same as drugs.
True.
I mean, especially when he was under pressure from Watergate when it was really starting to heat up. Apparently, he turned to the booze a lot. And there's actually like recordings of him drunk, like clearly drunk. Like there's one. We actually have recordings of him like calling a couple of his confidants the night before. He probably did that at some point and then had that destroyed too. But
yeah.
Like he's like.
So he'd get drunk and call confidants about Watergate.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's one from a couple of days before like the hammer drop where he's literally going like, "Listen, I love you, I love you. We're gonna be okay. I love you," and he's like slurring his words a little bit, and you're like, But apparently, yeah, he would get drunk and wander around the halls of the White House and talk to the portraits of past presidents, like late at night, which is like Shakespearean.
Yeah,
almost.
That's some Hamlet shit.
Mm-hmm.
Talking to the skull.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. And there's actually a kind of interesting Robert Altman movie from the 80s called Secret Honor.
Okay.
Where the guy Philip Baker Hall, the great fantastic character actor, plays it. The whole movie is just him as Nixon alone in his house talking to himself, literally for 2 hours, and just him ranting against his enemies, and he's like drunk and talking to paintings and doing all this crazy stuff.
It's like a historical Castaway. Yeah, like where you said, one actor playing off props.
Yeah, and the portrait of Taft is Wilson, I guess, or the portrait of Wilson could be Wilson. But yeah, he drank a lot mostly to cope with just the stress of his administration collapsing around him.
Yeah. That's interesting.
He was into that.
That's crazy. I love that. So did he have a dog?
Yeah, Checkers. Oh, totally. Yeah.
So they really...
Yeah, well, Checkers played into his political career in a big way, weirdly enough, in that when he was vice president, it's kind of an infamous thing or a notorious thing, but he was vice president for Eisenhower, and he got into some entanglement with some possible scandal about taking gifts from people, and he gave a televised address to the nation, which ended up being called the Checkers speech, where he basically denied ever receiving any gifts or things of monetary value from anyone, while he was in office, except for my dog Checkers. That I forgot who gave it to him, but that was kind of like, I think he was trying to come off as a little folksy and relatable to bring in the dog, Checkers. But whether or not he did actually hate the dog, I wouldn't be surprised if he got it, if he was like, fine, I'll have a dog just because it makes me look more.
Dude, I think that's the funniest thing about anything I see related to Richard Nixon, just like old footage and whatnot. It's just there's nothing creepier than like a sociopath trying to look relatable. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Just like that real, just forced kind of, hey, I'm cool. Like this is chill. Like it is just funny because like, I don't know, just so what was his approval pre-Watergate? Because, really good. That's what I'm saying, because it's always thought of that he was hated, but really he was pretty well liked by the general public, right? Yeah, I mean, like if you were under 21, you thought he was a fascist. Otherwise, you were like, seems like a good guy. Basically, I mean, and he had. It came out years later, obviously, all sorts of really relevant information on him, but I think a lot of people saw him as the guy who managed to deliver on his campaign promise, which was peace with honor, which is I'm going to find a negotiated peace settlement to get us out of Vietnam. But what people didn't realize was that he had secretly extended the war by 4 or 5 years longer than it should have been. It's almost an aside, but in 68, when Johnson is negotiating
with the North Vietnamese and the South Vietnamese to try and come up with a negotiated end to the war. Nixon and Kissinger contact the South Vietnamese regime. This is in the lead up to the election. And Johnson's, Johnson has said he will not run for re-election, but the Democratic nominee Humphrey, him and his party's fortunes in this election are going to rest on whether or not they can deliver on getting peace in Vietnam, on pulling through with these peace talks. And so Nixon and Kissinger secretly contact the South Vietnamese regime and tell them, pull out of the talks at the last minute. Pull out, and we'll win the election, and we'll give you a better deal. Just hold out for us and sabotage the peace process, and then we'll come into office and make things better.
I remember learning about this in Ken Burns' Vietnam doc, and it is stunning.
It's unbelievable because half of the names on the Vietnam Wall you lost their lives after
those
Nixon's election, and then of course Nixon spends another 4 years fighting the war, dropping more munitions on North Vietnam and Cambodia than were dropped by every country in World War II combined, and gets the exact same deal that Johnson and the Democrats were going to get in late 1968, and then becomes almost, gets a huge popularity boost for it and gets to ride that wave into a very successful re-election campaign, which I think the movie alludes to this, but it was actually the most successful presidential election landslide in U.S. history by electoral college votes. And that in 1972, Nixon wins every single state except Massachusetts.
Wow.
Which has never been done before since.
Yeah, that's like...
So that shows a level of the level of his popularity. And I mean,
and that was against Humphrey, right?
No, that was against George McGovern.
Oh, okay.
Humphrey was 68. George McGovern, who was a senator from South Dakota, or was it North Dakota? I want to say South.
Yeah. It's probably the last time anyone will ever try that. Any party will try to run someone from a Dakota.
Yeah, what was going on with that?
That was just a bad move in general.
Yeah, I think it was somewhat of a fall guy. He never had good prospects for winning. Months before the election, actually at the time of the break-in at Watergate, Nixon was leading in the polls by double digits.
So now that's what I think is always like I feel Watergate has just become kind of like a meme, like that word. And now we have everything is like
everything gate.
Yeah, everything gate. And so was he just trying to so the Democratic National Committee's headquarters are in the Watergate building. Mm-hmm. And so he sends people there to break in to essentially just kind of see what they're up to, just what the Democratic campaign is up to, basically just to kind of win the election. Like he's looking for like election information.
Basically, as far as they can tell, the motivation there, the goal was to steal documents and, more importantly, bug the DNC phones to get insight on Democratic strategy in the upcoming election, not just the presidential election, but the down the ballot elections, congressional, in Congress, et cetera, and to get, they think his main goal was really to get dirt or inside information on the DNC chairman, was a guy named Larry O'Brien at the time. And actually that is the reason that Watergate is uncovered, because I didn't even realize this until I looked it up, but that was the second time they had broken in to the DNC headquarters. And the first
did they get caught both times?
No, the first time they got away with it fine. They were in and out, placed the bugs in the phones and left, and then 3 weeks later had to break in again because they realized that the bug on the chairman's phone was faulty and wasn't working, so they had to break back in to fix it.
Okay.
So they actually got away with it, but just their bugging capabilities were so shitty that they put it in wrong, and 3 weeks later had to break in again, and that's when they were caught.
Yeah, and how did they get caught? Because so Forrest Gump would have us believe that Forrest Gump caught him, because there is a Watergate scene that movie.
Oh yeah, I almost forgot about
and
that.
And then in Dick, it's the two girls, Kirsten Dunst and Michelle Williams. They break in. Well, they live in the Watergate building, and so they break into the offices to mail out the love letter to the teen idol. That's like the first. And so basically their break-in trips off the security guard, who then sees the people breaking in and bugging the phones.
Yeah, which I didn't fully understand. Or I thought the idea was they were sneaking out, and so had to sort of be secretive and do it in order to mail this letter. But why couldn't they have just mailed it at any other time? I slightly didn't get that. That's something to do with the contests closing at midnight, or
I don't remember like the exact reasoning. The way it seemed like that's where the mail was, because they were in like this apartment building, so it's like that's where
the Watergate
mail went out
a
from.
Big complex at the time, had office space and a hotel and
so
condos.
it seemed like they were taking it to the office space from the apartment place.
Still,
I mean, it's sketchy.
Clear.
It's not as good as the Forrest Gump insertion where
That's
he just
true.
sees people and then calls the front desk or calls the cops. I don't remember. So what really happened? We have two fictional accounts, but how did they really get caught?
Well, it turns out it actually was the tape thing. Weirdly enough.
Oh, but they
put the tape on the door. Yeah.
So what happened in the movie is what really happened, except they did it and not the girls. That's hilarious.
Which is funny in a way, because the fact that there was the tape on the door that caused the security guard to call the police, it seems like such a stupid amateur mistake that it almost seems like it would have been done by kids or something. Like, these guys are in the CIA and they're like, let's just put tape on the door so it doesn't lock and then hope nobody notices.
You know what that really is to me? That's the hubris of a second break-in. That's second break-in hubris. Like, I guarantee you the first one they were more careful, and then they're like, man, this is old hack. We've been in this building before.
It was boring to them.
Yeah, so they're like, just throw some tape on the door. You know, just some delinquent B&E stuff. Nothing too crazy.
Well, it turned out, according to G. Gordon Liddy, who's played by Harry Shearer in the movie, very cartoonishly, by the way, which I like. It actually is less stupid than it thinks, but also quite full of hubris in that they did that because in casing the place and breaking in there previously, they had noticed that the night cleaning crew would tape doors in the stairwells just for convenience when they were going in and out with garbage cans and stuff, so they could just knock the door open with their hip or with their elbow.
Gotcha.
And so they said, we'll just do that, and they won't know the difference. Security guard notices the tape at about 1 a.m. He takes it off because he knows that the cleaning crew has already left for the night. And then he comes back sometime later, and the tape has been replaced.
Gotcha.
And he said, the cleaning crew is gone, so this has to be some kind of a break-in. And so that's what trips them up. And G. Gordon Liddy was like, yeah, we didn't realize the cleaning crew had already left. It's just such a dumb mistake. And there is hubris there, definitely.
Yeah. So, let's talk about G. Gordon Liddy, sorry. Who's that? I feel like I feel like I can't be like, I feel like everyone listening, there has to be a lot of people like me where it's like, I've heard that name a bunch of times. I don't know who the fuck that is.
I wish I knew more about his background deeper. As far as I know, he was a former CIA agent.
Okay.
Was working for CREEP, for the Committee to Re-elect the President, as probably some fairly, just dastardly background.
Yeah.
But since then became famous just as kind of like a guy who's just kind of a right-wing kind of mouthpiece and had radio shows, and I think he even had a show on Oliver North had a show on Fox. That's a different guy. But G. Gordon Liddy had radio shows and actually had an acting career a little bit, and played a bad guy in like Magnum P.I. in the 80s and stuff like that. And just kind of this
not bad life.
Not a bad life at all to do. I think he ended up doing 2 years or less than 2 years.
Okay.
Ultimately for Watergate, and then got to live the rest of his life as a quasi celebrity and someone who's is very much like, I did nothing wrong, and he's kind of proud of it.
Yeah.
Ultimately, and thinks that
that was just like a cool heist.
Yeah, that was just like cool thing to do,
Yeah.
And it's just very unapologetic about it.
Do you think that's going to be like Michael Cohen in 2 years?
Oof.
Do you think he'll go from like jail to just like, being on, you don't have to stretch it. He'll just be on the remake of Magnum P.I. Like we're already recycling.
He'll be playing every like Better Call Saul type character.
Yeah.
In every TV show where he's just every crooked lawyer.
Yeah.
For the next 20 years. That would be funny to see, actually.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure he could get on AM radio.
Oh, easily.
Right?
Easily.
That circuit is prime.
Yeah.
Or he could just start his own network. You go straight Glenn Beck.
Does Glenn Beck have his own network now?
I don't know. He did. The Blaze. Do you remember The Blaze?
No. Ew.
He's back now. He's back grifting.
Yeah, I did know. He has like a goatee now.
Yeah, he's looking very Colonel Sanders-y. Which maybe he'll be the next Colonel. They're doing that Colonel rotation.
That would be a great marketing.
Yeah.
decision for KFC.
Yeah, because their new
Go from
blazing
Norm
hot
Macdonald
chicken,
to-
right? He's already got the market on the blaze. You know, it fits right in. So he was just like, did he have an official cabinet role, Liddy?
Not as far as I know.
He has one of those. I think
This
that's
is
just
something
a
I should
cool
have
ass.
read more
That's just like
into.
a cool ass name, though.
You think so?
I like when people go initial name.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's cool as hell. G. Gordon Liddy.
Yeah, there's something kind of.
I'd be J. Thomas Golak.
Oh, your middle name's Thomas?
Yeah.
That's cool. J. Thomas.
What's your middle name?
McGregor.
So you'd be like J. McGregor Hack.
Yeah, which sounds like a guy who writes like bad mystery novels.
Yeah.
or something. I don't know. It's not great. But
All right, so we got G. Gordon. You know what I want to talk about? I want to talk about shit.
the cast.
Yeah. Woodward and Bernstein.
Yeah, that
Stein? Is it Steen or Stein?
Steen.
We got to pick every time there's a Stein name.
Yeah.
We have to. You're not allowed to pick. We need to pick, and that's what it is for everyone. It's either Steen or Stein, and that's what it is for everyone. I don't like that.
I agree.
So it's Bernstein, though, right? Woodward and Bernstein?
He pronounces it Bernstein.
Yeah.
Or at least everybody else does.
So, so they're played by Will Ferrell plays Woodward, and
Their portrayal of them in this movie, by the way, unbelievably
so fucking funny.
Yeah, really funny.
That could have been
over
almost
the
like a
top.
spin-off movie.
Oh, totally.
Just like an hour and 20-minute long movie that's just them kind of buddy copping around, just breaking stories.
It's Bruce McCullough.
Bruce McCullough plays Bernstein.
Yeah, the cast in this movie is off the chain.
It's crazy.
I had no idea Jim Brewer was in the movie.
Jim
for
Brewer,
one thing.
like you
Such an
said, Harry
odd
Shearer,
choice.
Ferrell,
Mhm.
McCullough. Dave Foley plays Bob Holderman.
Yeah, Kids in the Hall fans will like this movie. If you haven't watched it yet, which if you haven't, why are you listening to this if you haven't watched it? But
You should, yeah.
You should. Otherwise, you'll
I
be
assume
lost.
like anytime there's like a movie podcast, the kind of like common consensus is like you should watch the movie before you listen to the pod.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Because we're not going to give a summary. We're just going to reference things.
Oh, yeah.
Ryan Reynolds is in it briefly.
That was surprising.
And he looks young as hell, dude.
He does look super young to me, but like still like way younger. I mean, way older than she's supposed to be to me.
Yeah.
Like and I looked it up, and he was 22 in the movie. So
Okay.
even though he's supposed to be like 15 or something, he has a brief, almost cameo in it.
Yeah, but that's the thing. That's what I mean. It's like so ensemble. You know what I mean? Like it's mostly cameos, for lack of a better way of putting it. You know what I mean? Like it's like people coming in, dropping a hot part, and then getting out, which I think is great. Because but anyways, like so, I assume that the Woodward and Bernstein portrayal is pretty cartoonish. But is there anything to say that they were like that? They were kind of just like, I don't know, like I guess I would call them like petty. That's how they're portrayed. But I feel like that's pure just playing off their general thought ofness as kind of distinguished newsmen, right? Or is there anything to say that there was anything more than just goofing?
I wish I had a good answer to that. Have you seen All the President's Men?
No.
I've been meaning to see that for years, literally,
Okay.
and I probably should have, just because, that's important to just the overall story of this movie. Although you don't need to in order to get the movie, but I feel like that was just comedic flourish. I mean, there's so many really weird, like quirky choices, like the part when Will Ferrell is on the phone with Michelle Williams, I think Michelle Williams and Kristen Dunst. And Bernstein is like, "What do you do? You're talking about the source?" And he starts. There's a shot, like a low angle shot of him like walking like towards him, and he goes like this and goes like, and like flourishes his hair, like his hair with his hand like this, and like I'm like that is. I'm pretty sure he didn't act that cartoonish.
Well, I love there's a part after they break the story, they get the tapes from the girls, and they're kind of like famous, and they do like a montage of pictures of them, like just back, and it's like it's meant to be like a montage, but it's like they barely change the way they look. Do you remember that part? Like I thought it was so funny. Like it just shows like 12 snapshots in a row. Like it'll just go like click, 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 and it's supposed to be like it's funny because you would think it's supposed to be like a photo booth where like each shot is them doing something different, and it's like these 12 shots, and they're just making goofy faces, but they're literally they'll like just barely move or barely change their expression. I thought it was just like really funny.
I don't even remember that part, to be honest.
Yeah, it was very dry, but it was just very funny to me. Is that part, and I mean, just they're hilarious in it. I mean, Will Ferrell's just great.
That's actually a note that I wrote at some point, which is Will Ferrell. Oh yeah, Will Ferrell is really good at this movie.
Yeah,
especially because he's playing like something of a straight man,
right?
In the movie, which he's actually like pretty good at. People didn't realize, especially early in his career, every character was like a totally wacky, like outrageous guy,
Yeah.
and he's trying to be like how Woodward is in real life, like a very straightforward like nerd, basically. Like,
right.
Have you ever heard Bob Woodward actually talk?
No.
No exaggeration. He actually speaks like this, and I spoke to the president, and and he has a very, very thick, like old-timey Midwestern accent.
Okay.
And is a guy who like went to Yale and is just speaks in kind of a monotone, but with an over enunciation of each single word in that exact tone. Like, I'm not even exaggerating.
Yeah,
like,
that's funny because he didn't even really ape that, but that would have almost like added some funny to it.
Actually, I just realized he's kind of basically Alex Trebek in this movie. Like, he's just doing his version of Trebek from the Celebrity Jeopardy.
That is pretty true. That is funny. That is a good way to put it. I don't feel like, I mean, that's the thing about Ferrell. Probably the funniest comedic actor of all time. But not a
man down.
Not a big range. Not that he needs it, but I feel like it's you either get the Trebek, you get the Frank the Tank, or you get the Anchorman / Robert Goulet.
Right. Yeah.
Like, but do you ever seen him do the Robert Goulet on SNL?
Of course, yeah.
Dude, that's so funny.
It is funny. Even like the thing is, like, I don't know who Robert.
I don't know who Robert
is.
Goulet is. I've since found out, but I would laugh at those sketches for years with no idea who that was.
Just because of
and to me, that's the sign of
and,
that's the sign of like a perfect character.
Just the way he talks is so. But you know what the best version of that was a Red Ships of Spain.
Yes,
Red Ships of Spain is the greatest SNL sketch I think ever.
It's top 5.
It really is,
and I feel like it's so underknown.
Yeah,
it's on. It's on. I think one of his, because I think he has 2 best of SNLs, and it's on one of them.
Yeah.
It's the funniest thing, man.
It's so great. I won't describe it because it'll just sound.
You can't,
stupid. No,
but like
just YouTube Will Ferrell Red Ships of Spain.
But the reviews, like the reviews.
Yes, the reviews are the best.
Yeah,
part.
you're right. I don't even want, because like I don't even know them good enough to just say them off the top of my head, and I'll just butcher them. But I'm laughing, just thinking I'm gonna watch that as soon as we're done here. All right, so and then let's talk about Dave Foley, because that was a character like I said, some of these things,
right?
Yeah, Holderman. So those like I said, G. Gordon Liddy, Nixon, like these are people I heard, Woodford and Bernstein, like I knew something about them,
sure,
or about what they did. But yeah, Bob Holderman, I don't really know. I didn't really know who that was.
Yeah, I don't know that much about. He's the president's chief of staff.
Gotcha.
And I think his haircut explains a lot about who he was. Like,
yeah,
he had that classic like Johnny Unitas, like high and tight haircut, and was just kind of just a straight down the line, just hard hat, as Nixon would say.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, if anybody there's a really great, speaking of Nixon's tapes, like there's portions of them that are like. One interesting moment in the movie is when they find his tapes and start listening to. It's kind of meant to be like a simulacrum or a metaphor for the country's reaction when the tapes were released, because it revealed him as not just this like charismatic, well, not super like compared to Kennedy, he was not charismatic, but to an old person, he was like, he's a straight shooter and he's charismatic and whatever, and it revealed him as a deeply paranoid, troubled, anti-Semitic, and highly vulgar guy. Like that was the thing that actually shocked a lot of people in the country, as silly as that sounds now, but that he cursed like a sailor in private and had deep held prejudices against Jews.
Because people thought he was like kind of like a buttoned up kind of guy. I mean, it's like you said, like he's kind of playing against playing against that young person anti-war Kennedy vote. You know what I mean? Like he's a candidate of your parents.
And he hated Kennedy.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, because he felt like he stole the election, which he. Who
do you think he hated more, Kennedy or the Jews as a people?
Ooh, that's tough. That's tough. It would be hard to give it a definitive answer, but I would go with Kennedy, because he had, like, Nixon had kind of the old-fashioned just anti-Semitism where, he had a couple of Jewish people in his administration, Kissinger being the most prominent. But he was, he thought he was the kind of, I think, had the point of view of, they're smart, but you got to keep an eye on them.
Got to keep an eye on them.
Because they're out to, if you let them, they'll pull the rug out from under you or do something. But I think he truly hated Kennedy for several reasons, not just because he snatched the presidency away from him in 1960 through like fairly crooked means. People always say that Mayor Daley, the original Mayor Daley, handed Kennedy the election. That's kind of the old myth, in that it is true that they did do some shady stuff to essentially throw dead people on the votes in the ballot boxes, and did some he had his precinct captains out there doing crooked shit to get the vote tally up for JFK, which allowed him to win Illinois. But that's all pretty true, but even if he lost Illinois, he would have still won the election. People don't realize, but it was an extremely close election, and Nixon felt like he had been robbed by this young, pretty boy who was a member of the elite. Like was a big part of Nixon's sort of core makeup, was that he really considered himself to be the underdog and to be kind of the representative of the common man, which is in some ways he was. He had a pretty modest background, especially compared to most of the other presidents in the 20th century. He was a lower middle class guy. He didn't go to Harvard like Kennedy did, and he resented people who did. He went to his local college in the small town in California, Whittier College, and worked at his family's grocery store all throughout college, and then managed to go to law school at Duke, and just was kind of from a very, very normal, kind of humble background. And Kennedy was, to him, the ultimate of, the elitist Ivy League kind of Cape Cod type.
Right.
And so he really resented him for that, and resented people who he thought of as being, elitists. And so I don't know where I was going with that.
Oh,
what were we talking about? No,
we're talking about who he hated more, Kennedy or the Jews.
Oh yes, I'm sorry.
And you answered it. Well, and that's what's interesting, because what is his presidential history? So when does he lose to Kennedy?
1960, yeah.
Okay, and so that was the first time he ran for president, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then does he run again in 64?
I don't believe he runs in 64.
Because then it's
he runs for the nomination.
So because Kennedy gets shot in 63?
Yes.
And November
22nd, 1963.
So then Lyndon Johnson does a year, closes out.
Yeah.
He headlines the presidency.
He headlines it, yeah.
And then he gets reelected?
No, Johnson doesn't.
He doesn't run again?
Or wait a minute. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, Johnson does run for re-election and wins, but doesn't run the second time. He would have been entitled to run.
Oh, because you get to go again.
Rule is for vice president, if you serve out 2 years and a day of someone else's term, then that counts as a full term.
Cool.
So if you do under half of somebody else's term, then you can.
Gotcha.
So technically, the longest somebody could legally be president would be like 1 day under 10 years.
Gotcha.
But he declines to run for re-election in 68, and Hubert Humphrey runs instead.
Okay. That's when Nixon becomes, so he wins in 68.
Yeah. Becomes president November 20th, 1969.
So does he run? He doesn't run in 64.
As he doesn't run for he might have tried to get the nomination. He doesn't run in the general election. That I know for sure.
Yeah, and so then he runs again in 68. And so then when we pick up in the movie, it's 1972, and we see via like a TV kind of in the background that he just got reelected. That's kind of like when this movie starts, right? Is that he just gets reelected?
Yeah, which is odd because the timeline of the movie goes over the course of almost like 2.5 years.
Yeah, yeah. Because when does he resign? 74.
He resigns in August of 74.
Okay,
yeah.
So he does one term and then half of his next term.
Yeah.
Okay, and then what? Gerald Ford takes over, right?
Then Gerald Ford takes over, and then gives him a full pardon. But Gerald Ford, has the distinction of being the only guy to serve as president who was never elected president or vice president.
Oh.
In that.
Wait, how did he become vice president then?
He was appointed because Nixon's a VP that he ran with, a guy named Spiro Agnew,
Oh yeah.
was forced to resign
Yeah,
for some
for-
kind of unrelated corruption.
Right, I do
stuff.
remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Because you don't forget a name like Spiro Agnew. And also, I
Right.
remember when I was a kid, I went to a comic book shop, and they had like a stack of old Mad magazines from the late 60s and early 70s, like 30 of them.
that seems
And they
pretty
gave them to me for like $1. And there's all these references to like Attorney General Mitchell and Spiro Agnew and Haldeman and stuff. And I'm like, who are these people? Like, I'm like 8.
I would say, well, did like 8-year-olds in 1970 even know who Spiro Agnew was? Like enough to get
guess.
like a highbrow political joke? That's pretty funny.
Could be. I mean, I
guess
feel like
I
at that
remember-
point they were going for the counterculture kind of thing. So I think it was
That's
aimed more
true.
at like teenagers.
That's true. I mean, I guess I remember reading Mad Magazine when I was in middle school, and there was like a lot of Bill Clinton jokes, you know, so that probably makes sense. Okay, so he gets like, and we talked about this before. I remember we podded back on my pod about impeachments in general.
Yeah.
But so it did not look good for Nixon, and that's why he resigned, right? That's kind of like the cliff notes of it. But
Basically.
like, do you think he would have got impeached? Did that look like that's how it was going for him?
Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, the Senate would have probably found him guilty on at least one of the 3 main charges.
So he just figured. Just
Yeah,
do
apparently the
dignified
the Republican leaders in Congress came to him and said like, yeah, we're not gonna go to bat for you, dude. But you know, and the resolution to bring articles of impeachment before the Senate passed the House like 400 and something to like 10.
Damn.
Like just overwhelming
Straight roasted.
support for that. Yeah,
That's not good.
and
What
yeah.
was I gonna say? Oh shit. Nixon resign.
Impeachment.
Oh, so because he gets full pardon.
Yeah,
What was he facing anything criminal? Like
obstruction
could he?
of justice. Yeah.
So like could he have gone to jail if not
Potentially.
pardoned? Okay. So it wasn't. So you know, because we're kind of facing this now with like the Trump thing. Like the
there's so many parallels in this movie. By the way.
right, but but just that idea that like not everything criminal necessarily gets you impeached, and not everything impeachable is necessarily like a crime in the criminal justice system. But so you're saying like he actually had like criminal charges against him that he could have been, you know, prosecuted for if he wasn't pardoned.
He was never indicted, but he very well could have been. I mean, it's very, you know, difficult to say what would have happened, but it was possible. Yeah, I mean, he would have been open, I think, to being indicted for obstruction of justice, if nothing else, or conspiracy to commit the burglary.
Well, I know this seems like a silly question in maybe essence, but what it is, because we talked about how I think through the lens of history we forget that he was pretty well liked while he was in office. So what happened to his approval rating like after this scandal? Meaning, was there bloodthirst for like, all right, we should prosecute this guy, like we hate this guy now? Did it go a full turn? Or was it like, all right, well, he's out of office, like good riddance, but we're kind of done with that, we're moving on? Like, do you have any idea like what the public sentiment was, if they were just like fuck this guy now, or if they were like, all right, well, he's got to go, but
after he left office,
Yeah.
or after the tapes were revealed?
kind of, I guess both, like that period of time, like during that whole chunk, right? You know, when the news broke and then up until him leaving.
You know, I remember reading something once that said even after he was implicated in Watergate, his approval rating was still like in the 40s or 50s or something crazily high
This
like
does
that.
seem like exactly what we're going through right now.
Yeah. But as far as just from like my dad's recollection of things and just kind of the general, it's, you know, sort of tone of it, that the country was really bitter and felt that he had gotten away with it, and people were really angry about the pardon.
Okay.
You know, that's what sunk Ford's popular. I mean, he wasn't popular to begin with because nobody had ever even picked this guy except Nixon.
That's so weird. I didn't even realize that. And so he didn't run again.
No, he just finished out Nixon. Wait a minute. Oh wait, you know what? I'm actually wrong. What am I thinking here? No, he ran against Jimmy Carter and lost.
Okay.
Which why he bothered to try to run is
because he wanted a real term.
Yeah, he wanted a full term.
He didn't want just a hand-me-down term.
No.
You know, he wanted the people to pick him, and then he lost.
Yeah, and I'm sure that pardoning Nixon was a big part of why he was so distasteful to people, but they
you
saw it as I think the term that came out in the media was something like dishonest deal or secret bar. Like people kind of assumed, they had some kind of secret bargain.
They had
that
to.
I'll make you the president if you pardon me.
Well, they had to because, like, I mean, you're literally appointed vice president.
Yeah.
You weren't even picked. You were like given it. You owe it to this guy.
Yeah.
Right?
That's the least you could do,
That's
right?
the least you could do is pardon the guy that gave you your gig.
Yeah. That's just good manners, really.
It's just good manners. That's not even corruption.
And it was kind of a preemptive pardon because, again, he hadn't been indicted yet.
Yeah.
But he very well could have been.
Yeah. That's so weird. My mom talks about liking Richard Nixon. Which
Really?
I think is odd because she
Is
would
she
have...
conservative?
Not really. And she would have been what? Let me do the math real quick. Let me do quick math. Yeah, she would have been like in high school. She would have been like a high schooler for Nixon. What a nerd.
Weird. Yeah, right? So she's essentially Kirsten Dunst in this movie.
Yes. No, Michelle Williams.
Okay. Well, she wasn't quite in love with him, hopefully, but
I don't know.
Yeah,
Not going to
could've
ask too
been.
many questions beyond what I already know.
yeah. That was one of the parts of the movie that seemed incredulous to me because I just thought that the idea that high schoolers and young people in general would just be like, oh yeah, he seems like a nice guy or whatever. Oh, we're dog walkers for the president now. Isn't this great? But I mean, they're supposed to be like hyper naive, right? Like
Right.
like they don't even have any idea of current events or what's going on in the world around them is kind of the conceit of it. But they were almost too dumb, though. Did you ever get that feeling that the characters were like? I get that they're meant to be basically Forrest Gump, but
Right.
as two teenage girls. But
Yeah, I thought it was okay. I mean, so that's it. I'll just ask you this before we get into more history. Did you like this movie? I thought it was
did,
genuinely funny.
It's pretty funny. It's quirky.
Yeah.
Some of the jokes didn't quite land, and
Yeah.
there's some moments of like I don't know why it's a thing with their characters, but their characters are very into sonic attacks. Like there's 4 or 5 different points in the movie, they just like scream or make high pitched noises to. Especially Michelle Williams' character makes weird doesn't she?
She does the dog whistle.
She does the dog whistle and it somehow incapacitates G. Gordon Liddy.
Yeah.
I'm
Because
like,
it's high pitched.
I guess
You're not ready for it.
Yeah, true.
But isn't the thing about a dog whistle is you're not supposed to be able to hear it? Only dogs are supposed to be able to hear it?
Yeah, I thought that was the thing.
So it's kind of...
That's why it's a dog whistle.
That's why it's a dog whistle.
Not
but
a person
Yeah,
whistle.
we hear it. And humans... It's a whistle that attracts dogs and hurts the ears of humans.
Okay.
So maybe instead of being past our range of hearing, it's like right at the top of it.
Could be.
So a dog's like, ooh, sounds cool, and a human's like, too high.
Oh, okay.
It's like right in that range.
You'd think that it would be like one of those things of like, oh, if you can't hear this tone, then that means you're over 35 or whatever. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Where you'd think G. Gordon Liddy as an older man wouldn't be able to hear those high-pitched tones, but, it works for him.
Maybe it was just like a he's a dog kind of slam, kind of just like, just subtle burn.
I think so.
It was like a political burn.
That's the
My
subtext.
favorite part of the movie is the beginning when they go to the White House. So Kirsten Dunst and Michelle Williams, they go to the White House with their class. It's like a field trip. And they end up, G. Gordon Liddy, right, recognizes them from the Watergate. And so he has Halderman take him into an office to interrogate them.
Yeah.
And then Michelle Williams does the dog whistle. The dog comes. They hang out with the dog. And Richard Nixon appoints them White House dog walkers so he can keep an eye on them. And all of this going on makes them late back to the bus. And what happens when they first get to the White House is the teacher goes, all right, we're going to tour the White House. We're going to see this. We're going to see that. And no one really gives a shit. And then she goes, and afterwards, we will stop and get McDonald's. And everyone loses their shit. And then they get back to the bus late, and they're like, well, you're late, so now we have to go back to school and have cold lunch. And everyone hates them because they ran late, so they don't get to go to McDonald's.
Yeah, which was mildly puzzling to me because I was like, did people think McDonald's was amazing back in the day?
You don't remember the value of McDonald's, how it soared if you could get it during school hours.
That's a point.
So I think that was the big thing.
Yeah.
If you could get McDonald's during the school day, I mean that was the best thing.
Yeah.
But then
Can't argue with
McDonald's
that.
the rest of the time it's decent. But it really
Yeah, after school at McDonald's is just kind of,
It's fine.
you're going through the motions.
You're going through the motions, right?
It is what it is.
You're with your dad that weekend. That's usually what McDonald's dinner means.
Oof. That hits home.
All right. So what else do we got? Do we got anything else major to cover? Cover the impeachment. What does Nixon do with the rest of his life?
Not that much, apparently.
Yeah.
I mean, commits to writing his memoirs and,
How long was he alive after that?
died in 94.
So he was alive for a while, 20 more years.
He had 20 more years of life.
But never did he really ever re-enter public life in any capacity?
No, God, no.
What were those? Were the Nixon Frost interviews? Was that post presidency?
Oh yeah, I think that was that was 5 or 6 years later. I think that was late, like
so that's
78,
probably like
79.
his big and final just public showing of himself.
Yeah, I think I haven't watched those, and I've watched part of the movie that didn't make it into this podcast. But I think that was his like thing of like, this is where I'm gonna not exonerate myself, but kind of tell my side of the story and try to proclaim that I didn't do anything that bad.
And it didn't work out for him.
Well, no.
From what
when you declare yourself above the law, it's
I mean, isn't that the famous quote? He's like, if the president does it, then it's not illegal.
Yes, which is like more or less just the whole idea of absolutism,
which is
from
some
the Middle
Saddam
Ages.
Hussein shit.
Yes, yeah, it just showed just his hubris.
If I gas my people, then it's not a war crime.
Basically, I mean, it was the same principle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so we got Nixon, Gerald Ford. Trying to think who else was in this movie. Yeah, is there anything else you wanted to talk about? Any fun history connected to this movie?
I will say again, they did a fairly flattering casting choice for Kissinger as well.
Okay.
Like, not that guy was.
That's another. So let me look that. I got the whole cast.
Kissinger.
Do you have who he's played
is
by?
just kind of. Oh no, he's not super famous, but
Saul Rubinek.
okay.
Again, he's another guy. Let me see. Get his filmography. But yeah, you can talk if you want.
Well, he's a guy who he's kind of like a sort of little funny like side character in this.
Yeah.
Which is funny to reflect on because he's also like one of the most prolific war criminals in modern history. Definitely in American history.
Yeah, they kind of play him as like I don't know. I can't think of like an adjective. Like it's kind of like a put upon.
Yes.
Guy, like he's just like kind of always kind of trying to tell Nixon stuff and never really being listened to. Like he's just kind of this kind of not bumbling, but does that make sense? Like how they portrayed him?
Yeah, I mean, it does it
as kind of this put upon underling to Nixon.
I mean, for comedic effect, it's funny in a scene, but I don't really see it reflected in the historical context.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think that's how he's played. But yeah, that's not.
Although the crux of it is true in that they did dislike each other quite a bit. And there's a point where like when Nixon tells the girls to come into the Oval Office, he goes, "Not you, Henry," and just slams the door in his face.
But didn't he pick him?
He did.
Why does he not like him?
Partially because he's Jewish, partially because he's an elitist and an Ivy League.
So he's
guy.
The worst parts of the Jews and Kennedy.
In a way, yeah, but he recognizes that he's a very smart and ruthless operator, and a guy who really had no loyalties. I watched a couple of documentaries about Kissinger, and in '68, a colleague of his said that he got a phone call from Kissinger before the election asking if he would like to work with him in the White House after the election. And he goes, "Wait, so you're gonna get a job with Nixon if he wins?" He goes, or if Humphrey wins, either way. Like he was, for whatever reason, had it set up where he was convinced that he was going to get hired by whichever administration came in. I guess because he had positioned himself as kind of this like wizard of foreign policy expertise and all, but but he was integral to sabotaging the Paris Peace Accords and extending the Vietnam War for another 4 years. And
is that his only war crime? I mean, that's enough.
There's a few bigger ones.
Give me like his top three.
So I'd say that's in the top three, and then also East Timor is a huge one. It's actually what happens in East Timor ends up being proportionally the most complete genocide of the 20th century. In that, to condense it a bit, East Timor, for anyone who doesn't know, was a Portuguese colony. It makes up the eastern half of the island of Timor, which is in the sort of Indonesian archipelago. I think it's technically part of the Sunda Islands group.
Okay.
When the Portuguese Empire was collapsing in the 1970s, 74, 75, as a result of a democratic revolution against the fascist military regime in Portugal that had been fighting guerrilla wars in all of its colonies. People forget that Portugal ruled like probably a sixth of the landmass of Africa until 1975.
Wow.
Which is really weird to think about.
Yeah, you don't think about the Portuguese at all.
The Portuguese were the holdouts. Yeah. They were like Led Zeppelin was already out.
You look at Spain and you're like, what's that part of Spain missing? You're like, oh, that's Portugal. I thought that was all Spain.
It should be.
Yeah, they get lumped together. Like if you're like a language arts major in college, they lump it together.
Yeah.
You study German or you study Italian or you study Spanish, Portuguese.
I think it's because they're probably similar enough that, I mean, they have the same grammatical structure and stuff. But anyway.
I know, but that seems where maybe they could get, that's maybe where they get their colonial attitude from, is like just this kind of Napoleon complex, literally.
Oh, like they're the underdog.
Yeah,
and they
like,
feel
they're like, we never get our own. No one ever studies us unless they're studying Spain. We're going to go take over Africa.
Yeah,
and
just
they
like
did it.
So petulant, those petulant Portuguese sons of bees. Ugh, I don't know why I accidentally rhymed there, but
all right. So East Timor.
So to make a long story short, Kissinger travels with Ford to Indonesia to meet with the military dictator of Indonesia, who's been chomping at the bit to invade East Timor and take it over and annex it into part of Indonesia. Gives them the green light, the very explicit green light, and you can look at the transcripts of the conversation where they're telling saying, yeah, we wouldn't have a problem if you invaded East Timor and took it over. Just wait until we return to the United States before you do it, because it'll make it easier to control the media reaction if we're already home by that point. I mean, he's literally spelling it out. We're in very straightforward terms. Anyway, what ensues is genocide against the East Timorese people by the Indonesian military dictatorship that ends with over 200,000 people massacred in a very tiny country.
So that's probably like the whole country.
It was I believe a majority of the civilian population of East Timor gets put to the knife by the Indonesian military, and that mistake was only reversed, I believe, in 2003 or 4. Indonesia finally said, "All right, we'll stop occupying East Timor," and they got their independence. Making them, I think.
Was there anyone left to? Is there just 4 guys there now?
Pretty much.
Like, yeah, we're independent now.
No, yeah, I mean,
we got all this.
I don't remember the exact
we just
proportion.
Split it into fourths.
But a bigger proportion of East Timorese were wiped out than Jews were wiped out in Europe in the Holocaust, to give a comparison, not in terms of numbers, but just proportion.
Like proportion, yeah.
And that all happens under Kissinger's auspices and with his total approval, for instance. And then the other one, definitely worth mentioning, is his refusal to intervene or do anything about the Pakistani genocide in Bangladesh, what was then East Pakistan.
Okay.
In the early 70s, in which again several 100,000 people are killed, several 100,000 people are sexually assaulted and raped by the Pakistani military and by pro-Pakistan militias, and it's a huge sort of genocide and refugee crisis that kind of gets overlooked historically, and it's actually eventually India intervenes and defeats Pakistan in the 1971 war and allows Bangladesh to become independent. But Kissinger had a very explicit sort of let Pakistan do whatever it wants policy, because Pakistan was aligned with the United States at the time against the Soviet Union, and India was very friendly to the Soviet Union, if not aligned with them. I mean, it had very extensive military ties with them, and almost all of their military equipment was provided by the Soviets, etc. So he kind of let that wound bleed for months and months and months and wouldn't help the Bangladeshis at all. So those 3 cases I'd say are the main ones. Also, the support of the Pinochet regime and the support of the coup against Allende, which resulted in a almost 20-year military dictatorship in Chile, in which thousands of people were summarily executed by the state, thousands and thousands more thrown into dungeons, quite literally, and disappeared.
They brought back dungeons?
I mean, if you read the descriptions, they're more or less dungeons. Yeah, I mean, you're just in a concrete room.
That's a dungeon.
Smaller than this room.
Do you think that's a way we could get prison reform in the United States if we started calling prisons dungeons? I think it would just, people would be like, whoa, we got to do something about this. I didn't know we were putting people in dungeons.
It almost makes
I thought we were just putting them in prison.
Yeah.
But we're putting them in dungeons? This is cruel.
Because you get the image of like the guy with the long beard who's strung up by like the chains on the wall.
Yeah. Just with a bunch of like tick marks on the wall.
Basically, yeah. But that's the way to describe the Pinochet regime and the other right-wing military dictatorships.
It's crazy that this is also the guy that figured like he would easily have a job no matter who won presidency.
And he was right, though, it turns out. Somehow.
Right.
I mean, he is a wily, cunning, and he's still alive. It's really like the last like several years, every celebrity that dies, I go, that's another one that Kissinger outlived. And most of them decades younger than him. He's 95 years old. He turns 96 in May.
Yeah.
Tom Petty, gone. Philip Seymour Hoffman, gone.
Those are
John McCain.
I'll say those are some funny picks.
Yeah, I don't know why those were the ones that came to mind.
Tom Petty was pretty good, but Philip Seymour Hoffman, that was
just way
like
better people.
Yeah, it's true.
You know what I mean? Than him.
That is funny that how, yeah.
And he chugs along.
Evil people have some longevity to them.
I think that's true.
Do you think there's something about hate that makes you live longer?
I think hate can be a big energy source for a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's something that can get you going.
It's coals
in the
in the oven.
Yeah. I mean, it's a motivator. You know, hate is, I think, a bigger motivator than love for most people. I'm not even being like facetious there. Especially in politics, I think hate and fear are the biggest things that get people motivated.
What did he do? How long was he in? Did he stay once Ford was in, I assume?
Yeah, he stays on as national security advisor for Ford through the Ford administration.
And then does he stay in politics for much longer?
He becomes after that Carter isn't going to have him in his administration. Not just because he's a Democrat, but also because Carter's whole point was a return to honest normalcy in politics and return to, no more genocides. No more genocide. No more I can't even do an impression of no more I'm not.
That's decent. That's decent. You shouldn't have gave up. You had it.
Thanks,
you
bro.
bailed.
I feel like most people don't know what he sounds like because
I think he
was president.
I feel like I know your pain because I feel like in my head I hear his voice.
Yeah.
But I know if I try to do it, it'll sound real fucking bad.
It would end up being. Didn't he have a little part in King of the Hill? Was that actually his voice?
I don't know. That's why. But it would be that kind of voice.
I'm Jimmy Carter.
I'm Jimmy Carter.
Yeah, just kind of a soft-spoken, trustworthy seeming.
I'm going to be president.
And he is legitimately.
No one's going to like me. But then I'm going to save the world and no one will care.
Yeah. But ironically, I think a fairly decent guy and one who did want to reorient America's whole.
See, there's one.
Policy.
Jimmy Carter, still alive. Decent guy.
But younger than, I think a little younger than Kissinger, though. So we'll see who makes
He's actually 52. He just looks so awful because he's committed to love and care.
That's right. Building houses all day for homeless people, that'll take something out of you.
It is funny. That's just, to me, Jimmy Carter, and like, I'm not defending his presidency, and to be honest, I don't know that much about it. I just know it seemed like a resounding failure. But it is.
I think he was the case of just being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
I know, but doesn't it just like make you a little cynical, just seeing what his life became after that, where you're just like, oh yeah, I guess we can't ever have a good person as president. We gotta hope they just choose to be good private citizens. But if you're a good person, it's just not going to work out for you for president.
You think you have to be a bit Machiavellian?
I guess so, right? Because he just failed as a president and then excelled as a human being.
I don't think he failed as a president. I think he failed in his re-election effort mostly because of factors that were well beyond his control. I mean, mostly it was the economy, the incredible spike in oil prices.
I think the OPEC thing is like, that's the thing I think always defines his presidency.
Just happened to be that OPEC decided to try and put pressure on the West at that particular point over Israel mostly. and that caused this massive spike in gas prices, and then inflation, and and the country was in a malaise, as they say, just from the defeat and humiliation in Vietnam, and the shame and humiliation of the Nixon debacle and his resignation. But what seemed to really seal his fate was the Iranian hostage crisis.
Yeah.
But again, his rescue attempt probably would have worked, but if just not for just circumstance, and that one of the helicopters broke down, and it's just like that was beyond his control. I think it would have, I think if that rescue effort had worked, he would have won re-election easily, because that would have been like some Tom Clancy shit or some American hero.
But then
shit.
it just like kind of plays into his stereotype anyways of just like, oh, I don't really know how helicopters work.
Is that the stereotype of Carter?
Well, I'm just saying that general kind of like you said, like a soft-spoken, like, oh, I just thought it was made of peanuts.
Which seemed like his. I think that was gotta be partially legacy of Reagan's campaign's efforts to paint him as that, because I mean his thing was Vietnam was kind of a bad decision, so we're gonna stop intervening militarily in countries. What do you think of that, guys? And everyone went, yeah. And then after 3 or 4 years passed, people went like, man, I want to blow some shit up again. And then Reagan was like, hey, I'm here, guys.
Wasn't that? I think that was one of my favorite SNL moments was when I feel like it was the episode where Dana Carvey comes back to play H.W. Bush talking to Will Ferrell's Bush.
Oh,
I think that's the part. I remember the line. I don't remember if that's who delivered it, but it was when people were comparing Iraq to Vietnam, and Dana Carvey as H.W. Bush goes, if we learn something from Vietnam, it's don't go to Vietnam.
Yeah. I don't remember.
And I feel like that was like you said about Reagan, I feel like that was everything after the Vietnam War, for that 10 to 15 years was it wasn't about being anti-war. It was this weird thing of look, we learned something about Vietnam, which is don't do exactly that. Yeah. But for sure war, we're going to do war.
Oh,
but just not that. We're not going to do Asia war anymore.
Not Asia war. We're just going to do some Latin America stuff. That was Reagan's thing was, listen, these Vietnamese guys are tough. Panama, although, well, that was George H.W. Bush, but he was like, I'm going to just drop in on Grenada and be like, hey, you guys have no army. This should be pretty easy.
We just need to, it's you need to stack up some W's after a big loss.
Oh, totally.
It's like a prize fighter. If you take a big loss, you need a few warm-up fights. We're not going to go tackle the Middle East till we knock off a few Central American countries, get our confidence back up.
Oh, yeah.
So, and now we got that big dick energy back.
I got that big it's boom, Nicaragua, bam, El Salvador, bam, Grenada, bam. And
now we're just putting pipelines in everywhere in the Middle East. And this empire is about to fall soon, but it's going to be a good run.
Do you think the empire has fallen already? Is the American empire in terminal decline?
It's weird because when you talk about Rome or something like that, it's always you talk about the fall of Rome and you're like, I guess I mean, I don't know. You would know because you're the smart one, but I feel like that probably was 200 years, which when you're talking history, you're that seems like a moment, but you're oh, that's a family and then a new family. That's so many people. So we might be in the middle of it, and we just might be at the fun part of it.
This might be the fun part of it.
This might be the fun part of it. I think our kids will have to deal with the chaos, but I think for now, we're going to have Snapchat and, $2 gas.
That's a good point. I mean, from the Roman Empire's sort of high point to its final collapse, that's over 2 centuries.
Yeah.
So there's plenty of time.
I was kind of close on the number. Yeah, 200 years. I mean, if you live, that could be 3 people. If 3 people live into 70. So if you're the first or the second person, you're if you're the first person, you're I think we're okay. If you're the second person, you're I think that's us, where you're it's not okay, but I don't think I'm going to have to feel it, to be honest. But then if we have kids, they're going to be why'd you have us?
Yeah.
This is a nightmare
so that we
factory.
can get raped by Visigoths? Those are the worst type of goths, At least those Ostrogoths are kind of, polite about it,
It's a very specific type of person just being great joke.
Yeah, exactly. There's
there's
one
dude, Jeff
kid,
just nailed that Visigoths joke.
Oh, dude, the one kid who took AP European history.
This is what it was all for.
Yeah.
All All right. Well, I think we're wrapping. Is there anything else? Like I said, anything you want to close on? Anything on the note sheet that you want to hit real quick?
No, I had no idea this movie existed.
Yeah.
Until literally a couple of days before you brought it up to me, somebody pointed out that we have a VHS of it at the place I work at.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's just an odd coincidence. But it's not printed on DVD. I don't think if it's on any streaming services. It's kind of hard to find.
Yeah.
So good luck, guys. Rent it on VHS from Facets Multimedia.
Yeah.
Or how did you get that MP4 of it?
I just BitTorrented.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, RIAA. That's a hard one to say.
What is RIAA?
Or no, isn't that it? No, maybe that's the music.
No, that's it.
Fellow stealer of media, James Webb, he knows.
People of Comedy Network does not condone pirating.
Yes, but if you make it impossible to get the movie for money,
dude, no one's making money off this movie anymore. It's okay to steal it,
which is odd.
I'm not asking you to get like a bootleg of the new Avengers movie. You can download Dick for free.
Yeah,
no, that's a victimless crime.
Yeah, it's odd to me that the movie wasn't more successful because it's got a really great cast, and to me it belongs in that canon of like kind of like goofy 90s comedies.
Yeah,
that feels very tonally similar to like Kids in the Hall.
I'd say like if you like early Adam Sandler stuff, you'll like this. Like that kind of just like PG-13 but decently funny. I think it's as funny as like a Billy Madison, Happy Gilmore.
Yeah, it's a little less like aggressive than like Happy Gilmore.
Yeah,
but it's
especially
solidly
like
funny.
If you want a female-led comedy from the 90s.
A female-led comedy with a really great cast.
Yeah, it's like my cousins were into Romy and Michelle's high school reunion. This is gonna play off similar humor tones.
I don't know that one.
That's Mira Sorvino and Phoebe. From
Just
Friends.
Phoebe? Oh, okay.
I don't remember her name.
Lisa Kudrow.
That was on the tip of my tongue. Thank you.
So it's another one where it's like they play these kind of dumb people, and that's where the humor spawns from. And it's about these people going to, I think, their 15-year high school reunion. And they haven't really...
Is that a thing, 15-year high school?
Maybe it was 20. I don't remember. Yeah. That's why I don't remember the full plot. And they lie and say that they invented the Post-it note.
That's a pretty good.
Decent.
Yeah,
it's decent.
That's not bad. But I would say this movie is a combination, a three-way combination of Forrest Gump, All the President's Men, and Dumb and Dumber.
Yes.
Basically.
That's a pretty good combo.
It is.
That's the best plug. That should have been on the fucking poster.
It should have.
Yeah, then we'd have a DVD print of this.
It's all about marketing, guys.
I know. All right. Well, this has been based on actual events. This was Dick and the Nixon administration and its downfall. I've been Justin Golak. That has been Jeff Head. Thanks for listening, and have a good one.